Today's stuff we're going to be learning is Sotah Daf Yud Zayin. We're going to get started at the very top of the daf. New Mishnah. Balo lichtov et Megillah. So now we're up to the writing of the Megillah of the Sotah. Makom me'ez makom kotev. So now the big question is, from which part of the document, which part of the text in the Torah do we write? What goes into this Megillah Sotah? The next Mishnah we'll get to what materials do we make the Megillah from, and what ink do we write with. That's going to all come up. But right now we're talking about the content. So the first thing we need to know, actually, we'll use the study guide. We'll go further down. Okay. In Sefer Bamidbar, chapter 5, it says, Vishbia ota kohen va'amar alaisha. So the kohen makes her swear. We're in, again, chapter 5, verse 19. And he says to her, Im lo shachav ish otach, if he didn't sleep with you, v'im lo satit, if you didn't veer away, tuma tachad ishech, you didn't go sleep with somebody else away from your husband, you'll be free, you'll be totally clean from these bitter waters. But if you did go the wrong way, but if you did and you were with some other man, right? So then the kohen makes her swear. Again, it says the same word that he makes her swear. And he says to her, you will be a curse and an oath within your nation, your community. Right? We're going to make your thigh fall and your stomach explode. The water, the bitter waters are going to come into your insides. To make your stomach explode. And to make your calf fall. Remember, we talked about this in the order, how it changes. And then she says, Amen, Amen. And the next pasuk says, verse 23, so then the kohen writes these curses down in the book, and he erases them in the water, that bitter water. We talked a lot about the erasing. Now we're going to talk about which part of this do we put in? And here's a big three-way debate between Tanakama, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yehuda. Tanakama is going to be also called Rabbi Meir. So now the Mishnah asks, so from which part does he write? Mi'im lo shachav ish v'gomer va'at kisati tachat ishech ve'eino kotev hishbia kohen et ha'isha. Okay, so we start from v'im lo shachav. Now notice that this is, or im lo shachav, this is in the middle of pasuk 19. We skip, and this is according to everybody, we skip the words that the kohen makes her swear. We just start from what he says. If the man didn't sleep with you, and if lo sati, okay, even though that's actually worded in the positive, and we're going to talk about that later, that's in the good case. That's not a negative thing. But anyway, that goes in according to Tanakama. Ve'eino kotev, but then you skip the words when you get to the end of verse 20, and then it says again, and the kohen makes her swear. You skip those words. Those are descriptive terms. That doesn't go into the text here. We want to know the curses. It says, write down the curses. Then he continues in the middle of verse 21, after we skip the words, you can see they're in Rabbi Yossi, they're bolded here. After it says the kohen makes her swear, then it says, that goes in. Again, that's the curse. God will make you into a curse within your nation because your thighs are going to fall and your stomach will explode. And then the waters will come into your body to explode your stomach and make your yerach fall. And then you skip the end of we're already in verse 22. You skip the end of verse 22 where it says, you don't need all those connecting words, the descriptive words of what happens and that the woman accepts the swear. That's not relevant. We just want to know the text of the curses. Rabbi Yossi Omer, lo mafsik. No, you start at the same place from the middle of verse 19, but then you just write straight. You don't skip half pasukim. You write the entire pasuk. You don't skip parts. So Hishbia kohen et ha'isha in pasuk 21, you keep it. Amra isha amen amen at the very end, you keep that in. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, kol atzmo ino kotev. You don't write any of this stuff, really. He has the most limited. We actually saw this in the Mishnah before. Because he has the most limited, he puts less water in. Yiten Hashem otach la'ala l'shvuah. Uba'u hamayim hamarim ha'elu b'me'ayim. Ve'eino kotev amra isha amen amen. You basically put in half of kaf aleph and half of kaf bet. The Yitan Hashem, God will make you without hishbiya kohen. The kohen makes you swear. And then it says, and the waters will come in to your body, and this is what they will do. And then you skip that the woman says amen amen. So that's your machloket. You can look at it in the chart. It's very clear which verses are in, which verses are out. So between verses 19 and 22, we have these debates about which ones are in, which ones are out, which parts of psukim are in, which parts of psukim are out. So what's the Gemara ask for my kamiflige? What's the root of their machloket? Which they say, they actually argue about the following pasuk. Verse 23, which says what the kohen is supposed to do, they all darshan that, but somewhat differently. Rabbi Meir savar alot mamash. And the word ha'alot is made up of alot and the alot, ha'alot. So alot are oaths. So alot refers to the oaths, the ones we saw. Ha'alot comes to include klalot haba'ol machma brachot. The real alot are at the end. God will make you into a curse, etc. The beginning one is actually worded in the positive. So comes Rabbi Meir to say, well, ha'alot comes to include even the positive. Why? Because from the positive, you can learn the negative. It's a bracha, really, that right. It'll be good for you if you didn't go off the derech, off the path. But that means that if you did, you'll get cursed. So that's the curse is included in the blessing. You say it's so great you did that. We understand it's really bad if you don't do that. You did the opposite. Eile, what about the word eile? Eile is a word that generally means just these curses, not other curses. So what does he say? Okay, if it said write down the alot, well, we all know there's all these curses in Sefer Dvarim about all these terrible things that will happen to you. Maybe you're supposed to add those also. So alot eile means just these. And again, we're going to darshan the hay. What about the ha'eile? Ha'eile comes to exclude even more things. Ha'eile comes to exclude all the commandments, and not commandments, but the commands in this section, that the kohen is supposed to make her swear, and then the kabbalot amen, that she answers amen. He gets rid of all that because of ha'eile. Only the curses, not, right, these curses, meaning just the curses, not all the extra words. Okay, so now we have all these sections about the drashot, how Rabbi Meir got to the exact words that he included. Now we're going to do the same thing with Rabbi Yossi. So Rabbi Yossi, kulu kedek kamarta. He has all the same drashot other than the very last one. But he says, et l'rabot savot v'kabalot. The word v'katav et ha'alot ha'elu. Et is a word that includes more things. So et includes, instead of saying ha'ela comes to exclude, et comes to include. And what does it include? What ha'ela didn't exclude, which is all the commandments. And that all the commands, sorry. That's why you have the commands and the amen. Rabbi Meir, etim lo darish. Okay, what's Rabbi Meir going to say to that? He just doesn't darish et. Et is a word that we have some people who think we're supposed to darish in every et in the Torah, and other people who say no. So Rabbi Meir holds no. For Rabbi Yehuda, so now why does he have such a minimalist approach? Kulu b'mi'ute darish. He takes all these words. Okay, I want you to notice, and we're going to get back to this in a minute. If you look at Rabbi Meir, alot was alot, the curses. Ha'alot came to include more, which was the first section. Eile came to exclude, right, limited, not klalot and Mishnah Torah, and ha'eile came to exclude more things. Now the second, notice the first hay included, the second hay excluded. We're going to get back to that question. But comes Rabbi Yehuda, and he says all the hays here exclude. Okay, and we're going to see right now. Ha'eile. So now Rabbi Yehuda, alot mamash. Okay, so alot are the curses. That's the last two psukim. Ha'alot l'mu'ute klalot haba'ol machma brachot. These, right? The alot means these and not the ones before it, meaning not the bracha that you could infer a curse from the bracha. That actually matches what we saw before with Rabbi Meir, and even Rabbi Yossi agreed with that. And in this he agreed with Rabbi Meir that it's to exclude all the extra words. So we end up with the main difference with him is the word ha'alot comes to exclude the first section. For Rabbi Meir, now we're going to question Rabbi Meir about this. And this is what I said before, that one hay includes and one hay excludes. So Rabbi Meir, why does one hay include and one hay excludes? So what's the answer? Very obvious answer. Hey dikabe de ribuye ribuyehu. Hey dikabe de miuta miutahu. When you have the hey by a word that included, alot came to include these curses. So hi alot came to include something even additional. Ele, these came to exclude and say not the ones in Mishnah Torah. So ha'ele, the hey there came to exclude even more things, which is all these in between sentences, right? The commands and the amens. But wait a minute. Rabbi Meir doesn't hold that we can learn and infer lalot from brachot. Because in general, Rabbi Meir is known that he doesn't say, if you want to say both ways and you want it to go both ways, you have to express it both ways. You can't say, oh, I said it this way, from here we can infer the other. Or the Torah said this, we can infer the opposite. No. The Torah spells out when they want to spell it out. So basically, he doesn't hold that. So how could you possibly say, let's include this curse when it's not a curse, it's a bracha, and only because you can infer from the bracha the curse, you shouldn't be including that. So Rabbi Tanchum brings a different drashot for Rabbi Meir and says, Amar Rabbi Tanchum, Han hinaki, but it really is han kikti. It says it with a hey, but it really means with a chet. Hey and chet often in drasha world interchange. And now we have to go to the pasuk, and you'll see it inside. The pasuk says, if lo satit, if you didn't go wayward and tum'at tachad ishech and were impure under your husband, hinaki mimei hamarim hamararim ha'el. You will be cleaned from these waters, right? You won't get punished. But if you take the words out of context and you just take from this word, tum'ah tachat ishech, okay, which means, right, it was if you don't have tum'ah, but they're going to take it as tum'ah while you're under your husband, meaning you're with some other man, hinaki, chinki, you will be strangled. You will be strangled by the waters that you're drinking. So he sees at least an allusion to a curse in that pasuk, and that's why it goes in there also. Now we're going to stop the share screen. We're going to go back to, didn't put this on the sheet. We're now going to have a number of drashot. We're going to start with Rabbi Akiva. From there, we're going to get to a drasha of Rabbah. And from there, we're going to get off on all sorts of other drashot of Rabbah. Kind of one leads to the other. And eventually not really connected to our topic. Darash Rabbi Akiva. This is a very famous one. We're going to see a few famous drashot on today's stuff. Ish v'isha. The word ish and the word isha are made up of aleph, shin. Okay. Ish is aleph, yud, shin. Isha is aleph, shin, hey. So if you take out, you use the word ish, fire, and you take out the other letters, the yud and the hey, that's the name of God. So what do they say here? Ish v'isha zachu shchina benehem. If they have a good relationship and they're meritorious, they are deserving of merit, God is with them. That's the yud hey. It's in their names. Lo zachu, but if they didn't, eshel chatan, they get eaten by fire. Basically, if they don't have Hashem in their midst, take that out of their name, and there's basically fire. To which Amarava udi isha adifa mideish. Her fire is stronger. Adifa usually means better. Here it doesn't really mean better. It means better in the sense of stronger than his fire. Why is that? So they're going to give a reason. But before we get to the reason, I'll explain what they even mean by this. If a woman is in a relationship with some other man while she's married, so she's forbidden to her husband. But because in those days men had more than one wife, if a man is with two women and kind of cheats on his wife, even though it's not two wives there, but he cheats on his wife, he's not actually forbidden to go back to his original wife. So we see that it's much worse, the fire of the woman, fire initiated by the woman, than the fire of the man. That's what they mean to be saying here. Whether fair or unfair, we're not going to talk about, but that's a fact on the ground in halacha. So my time, and obviously a man who commits adultery is supposed to get killed. So it's not like he gets off scot-free, right? Assuming there's witnesses. But if there's no witnesses and we don't know, he doesn't go through a Sotah ceremony, and he doesn't, right? It's not considered infidelity in the same way it is for a woman, which is a bit of an unfair comparison. But again, you have to understand where it comes from. Since a man is technically allowed to be with more than one woman, and a woman is not allowed to be with more than one man, which is the basic Torah law. So that explains why it's more severe. It doesn't explain the basis for the law and why that was, but that's a separate question. So now they're going to say, my time. So what's the reason? Notice where the fire is in the pasuk and where the yud and the hey is. In the ish pasuk, it's in the middle of the yud. Take out the yud, you have ish, but they're separated by a space. The woman is aleph, shin, hey. So if you take out the hey, you have an aleph, shin right next to each other, and the fire is much stronger. The fire is together. Again, it's a little drasha on the word itself. Amarav. So now that we started with this drasha of Rabbah, which came as a reaction or a comment on the drasha of Rabbi Akiva, Now we're going to have a bunch of drashot of Rav. Why did they say to bring earth for the Sotah to put in the water? If she's worthy, she gets a son like Avraham Avinu, who's as good as Avraham Avinu. How do we know this? Because it says, what's the connection of Avraham Avinu and this dirt, this earth that she puts in? Because it says afar ve'efel. Avraham said, "Who am I, God? I'm just afar ve'efel." Okay, so he says, "That's all I am. I'm just, dust and ashes." Lo zachta, but if not, tachzor la'afara. So the afar is symbolic. If she's good, she's like Avraham. She ends up with a son like Avraham Avinu, who said, "Oh, I'm just like earth from the ground." If she's not worthy, she ends up going back to being earth in the ground. Basically, she dies. Darash Rava, another thing, since we talked about the Safar ve'efer of Avraham, we're going to get to another drasha. Because he said that to God, like I'm a nobody, not thinking, right, this big arrogant, I'm everything, even though he had good reason to be arrogant. His children got 2 mitzvot that have to do with Afar ve'efer. Efer para, which helps to purify all of us, the ashes of the para aduma, the red heifer. Ve'afar sotah, which again, in a positive way, which we're going to talk about in a minute, they're going to call it a benefit. It again gives this opportunity for the woman to have children and blessing in the event that she really was innocent. So now they say Vaha'i kanamia, right? And there we have the afal. So we have the efer, and the afal is reflected in these 2 mitzvot. That connects back to Avraham. Because of him, we got these 2 mitzvot. But there's another mitzvah, which is we cover the blood after you slaughter an animal. You're supposed to cover the blood with dirt from the ground. So they say, hatam. So why don't we mention that? Hatam hechsher mitzvah. That's just a hechsher mitzvah. When you slaughter, the real mitzvah is slaughtering. When you slaughter, in order to make the slaughtering kosher, you have to, in order to finish the process, you have to cover the blood. But it's just a hechsher mitzvah. It just enables the mitzvah to be completed, but it's not the actual mitzvah. Whereas hana'ah, right? And hana'ah leika, it's just hechsher mitzvah. It's not hana'ah. Whereas these mitzvot lead to benefit. Again, what's the benefit exactly? Well, maybe you'd say the benefit of the Sotah is actually bringing the truth out, what really happened, or again, the blessing she might get eventually. And the Efer Para is obvious. It helps us because we can become pure. Darash Rava, another thing. If we're already talking about things Avraham said, and on account of that, he got rewarded, we got rewarded. Okay, this is in the battle of the 4 kings and the 5 kings. Basically says, I won't take anything of yours, right, from a thread until a shoelace. Well, that's a chubanav l'shtei mitzvot. Sons, and particularly here, it's going to be a more male mitzvah, okay, even though there are women who do this, but for the most part, it's a male mitzvah. There were women in history at different points that did these mitzvot. But what do we see here? 2 important mitzvot that are mainly for men. The chut of tchelet and the ritzuah of the tefillin. The tchelet, right, the sky blue color of the tzitzit, and the threads of the tzitzit, and the ritzuah, the strap of the tefillin, which is like a shoelace, right, or from a shoe strap, I would say. So now, bishlama ritzuah shel tefillin. So what's the big zchut of these mitzvot? I get the ritzuah of tefillin, dichtiv, because it says, all the nations will see that God's name is on you. What does it mean on you? Tanya, Rabbi Lezer Gadol Omer, Elu tefillin shebarash. Okay, that's the zchut. We're through our mitzvot, we're able, right? And as Avraham said, imichut v'adzroch. Now, for that we got tefillin, which is our way of showing the nations that God is our God, and eventually, hopefully they'll believe that our God is the God. And then, or maybe they'll just be fearful of us, right? They'll fear us, and then, life will be better for us. But chut shel tchelet, mahi. What's this chut of tchelet? What does it do for us? To which they say, Tanya, also very famous line, Haya Rabbi Meir Omer, ma nishtane tchelet mikol tzivonim. Why tchelet specifically? Mipnei she'atchelet domeh liyam, because the color of it is like the water. V'yam domeh l'rakia, and the color of the water is like the color of the sky. V'rakia domeh l'kisei hakavod, and the color of the sky is like the color of the kisei hakavod of God, of where God sits in the heavens above. Shneimar, how do we know this? Because it says, Vayiru et Elohei Yisrael, this is in Shmo Kaf Daled, after receiving the Torah, it talks about that they saw the God of Israel, the tachat raglav k'maseh libnat hasapil, under his feet was like a sapphire, like a stone of sapphire, and it looked like the color of the sky. And not only that, but they say, the sapir looked like, it was like in the image, or it looked like the kisei kavod. So now we're going to say that color was reminiscent of the kisei kavod. So when you have the tchelet and you get to wear it, it's as if you have the Shekhinah with you. It's as if you could see the Shekhinah. Okay, so that's the specialness of those two mitzvot. Mishnah, right? It's interesting. One is more for you, that you get to see the Kisei HaKavod. The other is more for other nations, that they'll see God. New Mishnah. Okay, so just to summarize now, we won't summarize at the end of our page. So we'll summarize the first half now, and then we'll move to the New Mishnah, which in a second will be on Amud Bet, which you'll see is a very short Amud Bet. So what do we write in the Megillah? And for that, we saw 3 different approaches. Do you write just the very last curse, to half psukim, or do you write the curse that came before, which really wasn't a curse, it was more the blessing, but from the blessing, you could infer the curse. Although we said maybe that's a problem according to Rabbi Meir, why he does that, but we'll leave that aside. We answered that up. Then that really it comes from a different pasuk and a different understanding of that verse, that you will actually get strangulated, chinki instead of kinaki. And then we had Rabbi Yossi, who had the maximum, who put in all the words in between that are descriptor terms, and what the woman does, she says amen. Okay, and then we saw how each of them got to it from the psukim. Then we started a bunch of drashot, starting with Rabbi Kiva's drashah about Ish and Isha and the fire between them, if they either have God with them, if not, it's fire. And then from there, we got off on a whole bunch of different drashot of Rava. Okay, now we're starting with the new Mishnah. Eino kotev lo ala luach, velo ala niyal, velo ala diftera. You can't write on a luach, which is like a wooden board, or niyar, paper, or diftera, which is some unprocessed material. Ela al ha-megillah. You have to write on a megillah, which is a parchment that's processed. So the whole megillah, right, the Megillat Sotah gets written on a megillah, okay, on what we would call a megillah, a piece of parchment that was processed. Shene'emar, how do we know this? Because it says basefer, in a book. It has to be like a book. A book is written on something processed. Ve'eino kotev lo b'komos v'lo b'kankanton v'lo b'chal davar sheroshem. You don't write with komos, which is some sort of sap, and you don't write with kankanton, which is something like copper sulfate. V'lo b'chal davar sheroshem. Nothing that's permanent, because this has to be erased. Ela b'dio, you use ink. Shene'emar u'macha, says you erase, which means k'tav she'achol limachot. Okay? They say also, by the way, the dio is also a schach. It's a sap. It comes from one of the trees, but it's called dio, and it actually erases it. And you need something that can erase, because that's what it says in the pasuk. Umacha, it's supposed to erase. There's a big debate. We talked about this once before. How you erase it. Do you erase it by scraping it? So you actually scrape off the letters and in a most very actionable way, right? He does it. Or does it go in the water and it erases itself? It dissolves in the water. So nobody really knows the answer to that question. It doesn't really say it anywhere, which is fascinating because it's a very important central part. They don't really describe it. Amarav. So now the Gemara starts off, and we're now going to have a bunch of drashot. For this, I'll pull up the study guide again, and we'll see them inside. So now we get to the last chart on the page. We're going to see 4 halachot. We're almost done here. It's very simple. Megillat Sotah shektava balayla psula. So Amar Rava says, if you write a Megillat Sotah at night, no good. Why not? Well, my time, ate Torah. We're going to learn Gzeira Shava from the word Torah. Tivha chabayas in Sotah, it says, V'asala kohen et kol Torah hazot. That's this pasuk right here, right? And he does this Torah hazot. Okay, that's a pasuk in the Sotah section, right? It's pasuk 30, okay, lamed. Uchtiv hatam, and by Zakeh Mamre, which is a judge who doesn't follow what the majority is doing and starts teaching his own rules. It says there, Al Pia Torah asher yurucha va'ala mishpat, based on the Torah that you teach and the law. Ma mishpat b'yom, just like they do judgments, right? Judgment here is mishpat, just like they do judgments during the day. The court would never hold court during the night. So therefore, also we learn from Torah, it has to do with mishpat there. Torah appears here. Also, the Sotah has to be done during the day and not at night. These are all things that could disqualify the Megillah. So if you write the Megillah at night, disqualified. Tavala mafreya, psula. If you write it in the wrong order, which could be you write the psukim in a different order, or you write the words in the pasuk in the opposite order or a different order, or you write the letters in a different order. Okay, everything's backwards or a different order. Psula. It says you have to write them Ki dichtiva. It says write them, which seems to indicate the way they are written, meaning in their order. If you wrote it before she takes upon the oath upon herself, where he basically makes her swear and then she answers at me, if you write it before that, also disqualified. Why? Because it says first it says shpia, then it says v'katav. Clearly that's the order. If you write it as a letter, which means you didn't put lines on it. If you look at a Sefer Torah, it has lines. It's called sirtut. Okay, also, a get is written with sirtut, if I remember correctly. I think you can't write it without sirtut. Anyway, we write with sirtut. This is the way to write it. If you write it as an igeret, like a letter without the sirtut, no good, psula. Why? The Sefer Amar Rachmanan, a Sefer is written with sirtut, with those lines, therefore it's disqualified. So these are all ways, you see, it's very interesting. Usually we say maybe you have to do it, but if you didn't, it's okay. Here we seem to try to disqualify this as much as we possibly can. Maybe matches what we've seen in many cases, right? They were trying as best as possible to avoid this whole thing from happening. So any kind of glitch in the system, we're going to say, oh, no good, no good, no good, which maybe will deter them from actually continuing on the ceremony. Okay, we're going to see more halachot in the next daf, but also they continue to say these things are also disqualified, how it's supposed to be written, when it's supposed to be written, what time of day, what stage of the process, etc. Anyway, that's it for today, and we'll pick up from here on Sunday. So everyone, a Shabbat Shalom. Shavua Tov.